Welcome back to the Rebellion, ladies and gents. My name is Shane Hazel, your host. We are doing a different kind of episode today. We've talked about how things are going to change a little bit during this time. We've got a very weird world we're living in. Banks is going to be off-site, but you're in for a treat. Today, not only do we have 2 Anti-Federalist papers, we have 3. The first one's kind of short. I'm going to do the first one. This is number 15. Banks is going to do number 16. And because 15 is kind of short, I was going to go ahead and give an extra one in there, 17, because I think it is, I think it's just one of those days when a little bit more is going to go a long way. And you guys know how I feel about these Anti-Federalists. They were prophets. If you're out there and you're listening, feel free to share this. Please share this, I would ask you. We are in unprecedented times here in America right now. We've got some crazy things going on, but I'll tell you, we are fighting back. People are waking up to this tyranny, and I am just tickled to death to be in this position, doing what we're doing and sharing the ideas, being these, quote unquote evangelists for liberty, man. It's a hell of an honor. It is so, it's just great to have you guys here. For our longtime listeners and for our new guest, I hope you become longtime listeners. And hell, the way things are going, I hope that we're not canceled by the government here in the real near future. But if you guys don't know, you guys can go back. You guys can listen to all the other Anti-Federalists. We started at the very beginning, and there's a lot more to go. Maybe we'll be doing more and more of these to wake people up. But right now we have Anti-Federalist 15, and I just want to say, with this crowd, we're going to have to fight, guys. And I don't mean go out there and get into a hot fight, but we are going to have to make stands. And I will tell you also that the future favors the bold. It favors the brave. And if you can't be part of that, because you're a compromise, don't feel like you're letting anybody else down. You're not. Okay, you've got to preserve yourself so that you can fight in any way that you can. You've got to be able to lend yourself to liberty one way or another. And if that's not out and about because your immune system is compromised, then that's okay. We need you guys out here in this realm, spreading ideas like wildfire. And we're going to give you all the ammunition you want. There are now, this will be episode 178. My gosh, unbelievable. So you guys can have hundreds and hundreds of hours out there to go through. Go look at the title, see what's prevalent, see what applies in this day and age where we've been talking about this sort of thing, I don't know, coming up on almost 2 years here in June, and even longer than that with the last campaign. So without further ado, ladies and gents, Anti-Federalist number 15, Rhode Island is right. Weird to say in these times. I mean, right now we've got the governor of Rhode Island going out and sending the state troopers and law enforcement out there to knock on people's doors to see if they have anybody from out of town, especially if they have out-of-state license plates, people from like New York that are in Rhode Island seeking refuge and shelter. And they've even threatened to bring in the National Guard to help out the police. You want to talk about absolute tyranny, ladies and gents. I'm not going to mince words with any of this kind of stuff. We are in a tyrannical state, and the only way this gets better is as we push back, and it's happening. It is happening. I am happy to report. I want to tell you guys, I am super proud of the guys over in Forsyth County. Troy Brumbelow, I'm going to give you a little credit, man. When you came out and said that you were hiring 150 secret police and lost your mind there for a few minutes and were corrected by the people, thank God, and you rescinded it. It took a lot of guts, man. It took a lot of guts for, first and foremost, the people. You guys are neighbors, and you kept your cool. You didn't call names. It was just, hey, this isn't right. This is tyrannical, and this is not going to stand. You're going to have a real problem on your hands enforcing this kind of thing, and you're putting the lives of these people who you want to be secret police in danger. So I don't know. I was happy to see that. I was happy to see that all the pushback down in southeast Georgia, where they closed the beaches, for God's sakes. there's plenty of room on a beach to be social distancing yourself if that's what you really want to do. And now those are back open as well. So keep pushing, people. You're making a difference. So with that, Rhode Island. This essay appeared in the Massachusetts Gazette in December 7th, 1787, as reprinted from the Freeman's Journal or the North American Intelligencer, I think is the name of it. So without further ado, the abuse of which has been thrown upon the state of Rhode Island seems to be greatly unmerited. Popular favor is variable, and those who are now despised and insulted may soon change situations with the present idols of the people. Rhode Island has outdone even Pennsylvania in the glorious work of freeing the Negroes in the country, without which the patriotism of some states appears ridiculous. The General Assembly of the state of Rhode Island has prevented the further importation of Negroes and have made by law which all blacks born in the state after March 1784 are absolutely and once free. I'm going to pause. And this is what we do during these, people. If this is the first time you're hearing it, we read these and we pause. And being a student of history, we talk about these kind of things so that I know sometimes in the language of, the guys in 1780 whatever or 1770 whatever, it can be a little bit hard to understand. And that's why we do this. We do this to break it down a little bit. Rhode Island in 1784, along with Pennsylvania and quite a few others out there, are freeing Negroes, for God's sakes. Now, that's their term. It's not my term. I just think everybody's, people. And this in a juxtaposition with the Federalist, right? The Anti-Federalists were the guys that said, hey, listen, we don't need consolidated power in a federal constitutional republic. We need to remain states in a loose confederation. The Articles of Confederation, the biggest heist, the biggest, coup in history, some will say, when they took all of the states and threw them into this constitutional republic, we became less free. We became centralized, or power became centralized, and they gave them the power to tax, which absolutely destroyed everything. Meanwhile, places like Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and a couple other places are trying to remove the burden and the blemish and the repugnancy of slavery even before we became the United States of America. What a stark contrast in terms of what we see today. Men and women going door to door wearing, I'm just going to call them costumes, law enforcement costumes, because they sure as hell aren't upholding their oath to the Constitution. They are running counter 180 degrees to the Bill of Rights and their oath per Article 6, Section 3 to protect it. Unbelievable. They don't teach this. They have fully complied with the recommendations of Congress in regard to the late Treaty of Peace with Great Britain, and have passed an act declaring it to be the law of the land. They have never refused their quota of taxes demanded by Congress, accepting the 5% impost, which they considered as a dangerous tax, and for which at present there is perhaps no great necessity, as the Western Territory, of which a part has very lately been sold at a considerable price, may soon produce an immense revenue, and in the interim, Congress may raise in the old manner the taxes which shall be found necessary for the support of their government. So right here, they're just kind of giving Rhode Island some credit, basically. They're saying, hey, listen, these guys have always raised, the 5% that, this union has demanded. Obviously, when we say demand, it's because if you don't come in and you don't, meet the ante, basically, by decree, people are going to come out with guns and they're going to point guns at people, which obviously got to be one of the most un-American things around. And then point guns, cage, or kill if they resist long enough. These guys were meeting the mail. They were being an active, quote unquote, good part of this this confederacy that we already had. The state of Rhode Island refused to send delegates to the federal convention, and the event has manifested that their refusal was a happy one, as the new constitution, which the convention has proposed to us, is an elective monarchy, which is proverbial the worst government. This new government would have been supported at a vast expense, by which our taxes, the right of which is solely vested in Congress, a circumstance which manifests that the various states of the Union will be merely corporations, would be doubled or trebled, basically tripled, for those of you guys that don't speak 1780s English. The liberty of the press is not stipulated for, and therefore may be invaded at pleasure. The Supreme Continental Court is to have, almost in every case, appellate jurisdiction both as to law and fact, which signifies, if there is any meaning in words, the setting aside the trial by jury. Congress will have the power of guaranteeing to every state a right to import Negroes for 21 years, by which some of the states who have now declined and inquisious traffic may re-enter into it, for the private laws of every state are to submit to the superior jurisdiction of Congress. A standing army is to be kept on foot, by which the vicious and sycophantic and the time-serving will be exalted, and the brave, the patriotic, and the virtuous will be depressed. So, when there's a lot in this one, guys. So when they're talking about the elective monarchy as a proverbial worst government, they are talking about the constitutional republic. Listen, I know the old crowd gets it, and you're sitting there going, "Wow, these guys are awesome." The new crowd may not get it. When this all came together under when they were debating at the Constitutional Convention what this was, basically there were a lot of guys in the Anti-Federalist, and you can go back into the earlier papers and readings and episodes that we've done on our website. You can go up there and just search for Anti-Federalist. They basically said, listen, this is just a monarchy. We've just named it different things. The House of Commons is the House of Representatives. The House of Lords is the Senate. And the king or queen, by any other definition, is the president. What you have is a corporate country at this point. And it is a monarchy because everything reports up, which you will see in Anti-Federalist 17. And the states get, disposed, depressed, as they say, the brave, the patriotic, these people, the virtuous, are going to be depressed by this. And so what you're also seeing is, for 21 years, and I believe it's Article 1, Section 9 somewhere, and I'd have to check it a little bit, but it's basically that the importation of slaves was supposed to be stopped and sunsetted in the Constitution, I believe by it's 1809 is the year. And so Rhode Island and some of the other states are well ahead of this, and they're not going to go backwards, is what they are saying. They are not going to go backwards in history and backwards in liberty and subject their state to this trade or have it imposed upon them so that they can be part of this constitutional republic. I'd say that's a pretty amazing thing to say as a tiny little state of Rhode Island. Think about that. They are the smallest to this day, and they are saying, hey, listen, not on our watch, people. We're getting rid of the slave trade. This is antithetical to everything that we're talking about in terms of forming a new country and in saying there is liberty for everybody, not just white guys, not just white male landowners. Like, this is for everybody, and they're not going backwards in time. I think this is, when I decided that we were going to start reading some of these, man, I get excited because to be able to share this information with you, to see 240 years ago where we were and the decisions we were making should guide us now in this moment that we have. We are in this really cool moment in history where if we fight hard enough and we push back these tyrants, we have a chance to be freer than we've ever been in history, people. Think, act, be bold, be brave, push these people back. I mean, we have an opportunity like our framers did. And oh, by the way, we've got the damn blueprint and the guidelines and everything that they ever said would happen. It's happened. To decentralize, to remove power, to put it back in the hands of the people and the local city and county seats. Golly, what an amazing moment in history we have. We just need to have a little understanding of where we've been and the mistakes that we've been made. That hell, these prophets, the anti-federalists that are never talked about in our country, were right. The last paragraph of Anti-Federalist 15. The writer therefore thinks it's the part of wisdom to abide, like the state of Rhode Island, by the old Articles of Confederation, which, if re-examined with attention, we shall find worthy of a great regard. That we should have high praise to the manly and public spirited 16 members who lately seceded from our House of Assembly in Pennsylvania, and that we should all impress with great care this truth, our minds, that it is very easy to change a free government into an arbitrary one, but that it is very difficult to convert tyranny into freedom. Whoa! Golly! Are we listening? Do we have a moment to spare to take things like this and share them? Do you have the fortitude right now, ladies and gents, to share this type of message with people? Rhode Island seceded from Pennsylvania. They did so peacefully. They fought the enforcement of slavery in the slave trade before it was popular, before it was cool, in the name of liberty. And here they are saying exactly what the moment we are in, that it is hard, very difficult to convert from tyranny to freedom. It is easy to change a free government into an arbitrary one. Have we not seen this? Have we not seen the executives of almost every state come out with executive order, arbitrary, antithetical to their oath, antithetical to our rights of assembly, our rights to travel, our right to work, our right to run business, our right of association, our right to bear arms, our right to be secure in our persons, property, and effects. Those effects meaning our communications. How easily have they done this, and with a little bit of fear, a little bit of manipulation in the human condition, which has experienced sickness as long as humans have been around. Unbelievable. I am tickled to death to read this to you. I will be even more tickled to death if you guys decide to share this. This is the kind of thing that people need to hear. This is over 240 years of understanding right at our fingertips. These guys said this would happen. And here we are. We are in a moment. Be brave. Be courteous to each other. And now you will hear Banks read Anti-Federalist paper number 16.
Hey guys, this is Banks. As you can see, Shane and I are recording two different readings of the Anti-Federalist papers. We couldn't get into the studio together today, and I couldn't get home, so I'm doing it from up here in North Georgia, where I'm running Matt Gertler's campaign for Congress. on my iPhone, and that's why the quality kind of sucks. I'm sure Shane will make it better in post-production, though. I just read Anti-Federalist Papers number 15 that Shane just did, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to be doing Anti-Federalist Papers number 16, called Europeans Admire and Federalists Decry the Present System. It's by a guy named Alfred, who defended the Articles of Confederation taken from the New York Journal, December 25th, 1787, as reprinted from the Philadelphia Independent Gazetter. To the real patriots of America, America is now free. She now enjoys a greater portion of political liberty than any other country under heaven. How long she may continue so depends entirely upon her own caution and wisdom. If she would look to herself more and less to Europe, I am persuaded it would tend to promote her facility. She possesses all the advantages which characterize a rich country within herself. She ought less to regard the politics, the manufacturers, and the interest of distant nations. That's probably pretty true. There was a big battle when an intellectual battle when the revolution was happening about those who kind of wanted a better European model, a better monarchy, and those who actually wanted to be free. When I look at our situation, climate, extent, soil and its productions, rivers, ports, when I find I can at this time purchase grain, bread, meat, and other necessities of life at a reasonable rate in this country, when I see we are sending great quantities of tobacco, wheat, and flour to England and other parts of the globe beyond the Atlantic, when I get on the other side of the Western Mountains and see an extensive country, which, for its multitude of rivers and fertility of soil, is equal, if not superior, to any other whatever, when I see these things, I cannot be brought to believe that America is in the deplorable ruined condition which some designing politicians represent. It's funny because in the age of coronavirus, if you're listening to this in the future, it was an interesting time, but in the age of coronavirus, all the politicians who enjoy the solutions that are being proposed and enacted, the curfews, the stimulus, the socialist programs, that's the same thing they're trying to do. They're trying to make it look worse so that they can push their agenda. It's kind of the same thing we see here. Or that we are in a state of anarchy beyond redemption unless we adopt without any addition or amendment the new constitution proposed by the late convention, a constitution which, in my humble opinion, contains the seeds and scions of slavery and despotism. When the volume of American Constitutions by John Adams first made its appearance in Europe, we find some of the most eminent political writers of the present age and the reviewers of literature full admiration, declaring they have never before seen such much good sense, freedom, and real wisdom in one publication. Our good friend, Dr. Richard Price, was charmed and almost prophesied the near approach of the happy days of the millennium. We have lived under these constitutions, and after the experience of a few years, some among us are ready to trample them under their feet, though they have been esteemed even by our enemies as pearls of great price. Let us not, ye lovers of freedom, be rash and hasty. Perhaps the real evils we labor under do not arise from these systems. There may be other causes to which our misfortunes may be properly attributed. Read the American constitutions, as you will find our essential rights and privileges well guarded and secured. May not our manners be the source of our national evils? May not our attachment to foreign trade increase them? Have we not acted imprudently in exporting almost all our gold and silver for foreign luxuries? Is it not acknowledged that we have not a sufficient quantity of the precious metals to answer the various purposes of government and commerce? And without a breach of charity, it may be said that the deficiency arises from the want of public virtue in preferring private interests to every other consideration. And there you have it, of course, or often in the Anti-Federalist papers, the basic truths that come out, which is that personal responsibility is important, and the real nature of things. The real nature of things is maybe the current system they lived in, a confederation of states, which each had their own constitutions, even if they weren't all named that way, already did what needed to be done. A loosely associated group of people, separated into smaller groups of people who came together in an agreement to have trade between each other, but still have their sovereignty, and to protect each other as, well, I guess one confederation, not one nation, but as one group of people, and that there didn't need to be more, and that the exaggerations from those who wanted a stronger central government, a constitution, was actually not needed, that the negative things that are happening to society are the negative consequences of all societies, the consequences of people's individual actions. But of course, when you don't understand, or you're not willing to, depending on the level of malintent of some of the Federalists out there, when you're not willing to tell people, hey, there's actually a reason for all the bad things that happen. Some of it is just life, because, the world is a dangerous place. And some of it is your own individual decisions that have had an effect. Maybe you spent too much. Maybe you're not focusing on the fundamentals and what is really important. Or maybe you want to have an easier life at the expense of others. Or worse, maybe you want to enslave others so you can have an even better life. Okay, back to it. If the states had, in any tolerable degree, been able to answer the requisitions of Congress, if the Continental Treasury had been so far assisted as to have been enabled us to pay the interest on the foreign debt, possibly we should have heard little, very little, about a new system of government. That means, of course, they spent too much, and now instead of wanting to react to reality, the reality is, well, maybe you need to have a smaller government, maybe you need to have a more moderate approach on spending so that you can pay for what you did, which is spend a lot of money on trying to be free. No, they want a system where they won't have to pay for those consequences so much. It is a just observation that in modern times, money does everything. If a government can command this unum necessarium, which I'm not exactly sure what that means, but something necessary, I guess, from a certain revenue, it may be considered as wealthy and respectable. If not, it will lose its dignity, become insufficient and contemptible. But cannot we regulate our finances and lay the foundations for a permanent and certain revenue without undoing all that we have done, without making an entire new government? The most wise and philosophical characters have bestowed on our old systems the highest encomiums. Not sure what that means. I guess it's the highest praise. So what he's talking about is there were so many people all over the world, mainly in Europe, who are saying how well America as a continent, I guess, North America as a continent, was doing. But because they had succeeded in pushing off the largest, most powerful army in the world, so they must have been doing something right. Are we sure this new political phenomenon will not fail? If it should fail us, is there not a great probability that our last state will be worse than the first? Orators may declaim on the badness of the times as long as they please, but I must tell them that the want of public virtue and the want of money are two of the principal sources of our grievances. And if we are under the pressure of these wants, it ought to teach us frugality, to adopt a frugal administration for public affairs. And it's signed by Alfred, as I said earlier. I did not read this once before I read it this time, and it's a pretty simple one. It's just talking about what government always does. It always exaggerates things and wants to make the current situation seem so bad oftentimes because of their own mistakes. And here it's the same thing. It's like, hey, you squandered and got into too much debt, and so these consequences are pretty bad. And then put that debt and those consequences on the people, which in turn gives them more power, because they're the only ones, of course, who can give us a solution, right?
All right, ladies and gents, Banks has just read Anti-Federalist 16 on the Europeans. Hope you enjoyed that as well. I am going to do a bonus one since 15 was so short, like I was telling you. This is Anti-Federalist paper number 17, the title of which is Federalist Power Will Ultimately Subvert State Authority. For you guys watching on YouTube, you see my face. Like, and you just sit there. And I am, I don't know, giddy with the idea that, you know, we have this to read, to say, we should have known. We should have taught this in history. The fact that they don't teach this in government indoctrination courses in schools, for those of you guys that don't speak rebellion yet, it should tell you everything you need to know about what they want in a perfect, docile citizen, one that comes up with his taxes out of fear of being caged, maybe killed. You know, that's what we're talking about. And I'm excited to read number 17 to you guys. So again, the title of this is Federal Power Will Ultimately Subvert State Authority. Here we go. The necessary and proper clause has from the beginning been a thorn in the side of those seeking to reduce federal power, but its attack by Brutus served to call attention to it. Leaving a paper trail of intent verifying its purpose was not to give Congress anything the Constitution forgot, but rather to show two additional tests of any legislation Congress should attempt, to wit, that the intended actions would be both necessary and proper to executing powers given under clauses 1 through 17 of Article 1, Section 8. This is the famous Brutus. All right, that's the opening of this, guys. This is, so for those of you guys that don't know, the powers, really, there are very few powers. Powers are limited and defined, and that is per the words of James Madison in Federalist Paper number 45. Why do I know that? I don't know. Maybe I have a little bit of autism where I just love this kind of stuff, and I think that it bears repeating. Powers are limited and defined in the Constitution, most of which can be found in Article 1, Section 8, 1 through 17. Those are the powers, okay? This, without that, because when we talk about clauses like the necessary and proper clause, the interstate commerce clause, the general welfare clause, those are not defined. And so they are not powers. What they do is further define, help understand why those powers are there to begin with. It is not to give the product of the Constitution, which is the contract that was put together by the states, which are the parties, the power to change the contract and ultimately control the parties. Okay? That is a real understanding that you must have. And I will say that one more time. The states of the contract, being the Constitution, the states are the parties. They are superior to not only the contract, they are also superior to the actual product, which is the U.S. government. The U.S. government cannot change the contract without an Article 5 convention and an amendment. Okay, so it must be done through an Article 5, or else it is absolutely null and void, and that is per Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution. So, without further ado, and if you guys got questions on this kind of stuff, hit me up. I will explain it in a live video or whatever I need to do to get these things across. This new government is to possess absolute and uncontrollable powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, with respect to every object to which it extends. For by the last clause of Section 8th, Article 1st, it is declared that the Congress shall have the power, quote, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or office thereof, end quote. And by the 6th article, it is declared, quote, that this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and the treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or law of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding, end quote. It appears from these articles that there is no need of any intervention of the state governments between the Congress and the people to execute any one power vested in the general government, and that the Constitution and laws of every state are nullified and declared void, so far as they are or shall be inconsistent with the Constitution, or the laws made in pursuance of it, or with the treaties made under the authority of the United States. The government, then, so far as it extends, is a complete one, and not a confederation. I'm going to pause right here. This is what we talk about when we talk about Article 6, Section 2. It is an extremely... It might be what is the most important clause inside of the Constitution, ladies and gents. The mechanics of this cannot be understated. And this is why why Brutus is talking about this in Anti-Federalist paper number 17. All law must be pursuant to the Constitution. Okay? Those few and defined powers that we talked about in the beginning of Article 1, Section 8, the 1 through 17 there, those are the defined powers. And outside of that, there can be no law that is passed, for it will not be withstanding. And every officer, every judge, every law enforcement person, everybody who swears an oath, per Article 6, Section 3, they all have to. Everybody who swears an oath is bound to uphold the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. This is extremely important because right now what he's arguing is that per this clause, they can pretty much do any damn thing they want. It's also a restrictive clause, and that's the thing is a lot of people out there who will claim to be constitutional experts will say, well, the supremacy clause gives the federal government carte blanche rule over everyone in the United States, so that whatever the federal government decides, even if it's not in the purview of the Constitution or not in pursuance of the Constitution, is still law. It's absolutely false. It's erroneous. It is one of the greatest deceptions that was ever pulled on not only America, but the world, for God's sakes. That's why they talk about it being a coup. All right, back to it. It is as much one complete government as the New York as that of New York or Massachusetts, has an absolute and perfect powers to make and execute all laws, to appoint officers, institute courts, declare offenses, and annex penalties with respect to every object to which it extends, and any other in the world. So far, therefore, as its powers reach, all ideas of confederation are given up and lost. This is a big deal for these guys. Confederation, obviously, they had a lot more power reserved to the states, is what the Anti-Federalists were talking about even at that time. It is truly this government, if it is true, this government is limited to certain objects, or to speak more properly, some small degree of power is still left to the states. But a little attention to the powers vested in the general government will convince every candid man that if it is capable of being executed, all that is reserved for the individual states must very soon be annihilated. except so far as they are barely necessary to the organization of the general government. The powers of the general legislature extend to every case that is of the least importance. There is nothing valuable to human nature, nothing dear to free men, but what is within its power. It has the authority to make laws which will affect the lives, the liberty, and the property of every man in the United States, nor can the Constitution or laws of any state in any way prevent or impede the full and complete execution of every power given. Boy, have I said this once or twice? Have I contended that governments are not stood up to protect life, liberty, and property? No. Nay, they would say back in the 1780s. No, government must, by its very nature, consume the lives through taxes, the liberty, because now we have taken life away from men and women to pay for government and property from the people to actually exist. Life, liberty, and property are the cost of government. And therefore, I think it's a scourge on mankind. The bigger the government, the more unholy and despotic it is, and here we are. The legislative power is competent to lay taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. There is no limitation to this power, unless it be said that the clause which directs the use to which those taxes and duties shall be applied may be said to be a limitation. But this is no restriction of the power at all, for by this clause they are to be applied to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But the legislature have no authority to contract debts at their discretion. They are the sole judges of what is necessary to provide for the common defense, and they only are to determine what is for the general welfare. I'm gonna pause here again. Do we not see this, ladies and gents, now? The abuse of these clauses. These men argued that these clauses should not be left in the Constitution. They railed against them. They internalized, they agonized, they knew what would happen. Maybe not right away, but here we are, 240 years later, probably $26 trillion in debt. Debt up to your great-grandchildren's eyeballs. Nations do not survive that kind of debt. At some point, the people must pay. And it is often said that the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Wow. And they were right. This Constitution and the people were not able to restrain a constitutional republic. The smallest government ever conceived has grown to the largest empire the world has ever seen, and now, as all empires, they have gotten overextended. Nobody believes in the government. Nobody believes in their propaganda. Nobody trusts any of it anymore. We are reeling as this thing collapses. And they were spot on about it. Let's not make them this mistake next time, because it is with us now, guys. We have the opportunity to not do this again. And maybe we are better off as some sort of loose confederation. I know I will not lose the love I have for my my brothers and sisters in different states, in different countries. I want peaceful people to unite to throw off these god-awful governments. Say no more. We will live, we will trade, we will travel, and we will associate with whoever we damn well want to. And if you attack peaceful people, God forgive you, because we will come to their defense. Ladies and gents, America, you have bought over 500,000 or 500 million arms, trillions of rounds of ammunition. On April 19th, I hope you will join me at your local county and city, armed to the teeth peacefully, and remind these men and women who are supposed to be our servants where they fit in to this thing called America. Or at least where they're going to fit in when we're done. This power, therefore, is neither more nor less than a power to lay and collect taxes, imposts, excises at their pleasure. Not only do the power to lay taxes unlimited as to the amount they may require, but it is perfect and absolute to raise, hem in any mode they please. Well, I'm going to stop again. Can you guys count the taxes that we have? I sure as hell can't. Everything we do is taxed. From the time we are born till the time, even after we are dead. They have done it. No state legislator, or any power in the state governments have any more to do in carrying this into effect than the authority of one state has to do with that of another. And the business, therefore, of laying and collecting taxes, the idea of confederation is totally lost, and that of one entire republic is embraced. It is the proper here to remark that the authority to lay and collect taxes is the most important of any power that can be granted. It connects with it almost all other powers, or at least will in the process of time draw all others after it. It is the great mean of protection, security, and defense in a good government, and the great engine of oppression and tyranny in a bad one. Golly, isn't it? Ah, boy. Yeah, they've taken our money. Now the cops are telling us we're not coming. The schools have closed down. They've taken your property tax. And you are seeing the makings of the new American tyranny. And they've done it with our own money. The ability to tax people, the ability to enslave and bond and do all the things that they have done through places like the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. It is not part of our government. It is an international banking cabal that will end up being the ruin of this country. They've done it. This cannot fail of being the case if we consider the contracted limits which are set by the Constitution to the state governments on this article of raising money. No state can emit paper money, lay any duties or imposts or on imports or exports, but by consent of the Congress. And then the net produce shall be for the benefit of the United States. The only means, therefore, left for any state to support its government and discharge its debts is by direct taxation. And the United States have also power to lay and collect taxes in any way they please. Everyone who has thought on the subject must be convinced that but small sums of money can be collected in any country by direct tax, When the federal government begins to exercise the right of taxation in all its parts, the legislators of the several states will find it impossible to raise monies to support their governments. Without money, they cannot be supported, and they must dwindle away, and as before observed, their powers be absorbed into that general government. And here we are. How much do we give back to the state? How much does the state, I don't care which state it is, how much does your state send to the empire? Just to have it dangled back in front of them for federal incentives. Low-cost housing comes to mind. Certain types of development, roads, your interstates. If you don't do this, then you're not getting the money. And the stimulus package, if you do not lock down your state and threaten your people with force, coercion, caging, and possibly death, you're not getting your money back. We have become subjects of the empire, people. How long are we going to let this last? These people are no less than traitors, treasonous, oath-breaking hypocrites, liars, cheats, thieves, and murderers. These are my words. Are we going to let this stand? Are we going to let them continue robbing us blind to enslave us? It's time to stand. Without money, they cannot be supported, and they must dwindle, is what they said. They have dwindled. The executives of every state, including Brian Kemp here in Georgia, our governor, has been made to bow before the empire and enslave his own people by force. I hope you're proud of yourself, Brian Kemp. I hope you're proud of yourself, all law enforcement. You guys are the guys that should be standing out right now. Your local sheriffs, your deputies, your police captains, and the people that make those up. You guys should be standing out and saying, not on my damn watch. If you need help understanding it, I'm still here. I would be happy to educate you on it. It might be here shown that the power in the federal legislature to raise and support armies at pleasure as well in peace as in war, and their control over the militia tend not only to a consolidation of government, but the destruction of liberty. I shall not, however, dwell upon these, as a few observations upon the judicial power of this government in addition to the preceding will fully evince the truth of the position. Well, no kidding. Look at all the stuff, all the militarization of law enforcement in this country. He's about to get into a subject that I think we should talk a lot more about all the time, and that is the judicial power here in the United States. Get ready, people. The judicial power of the United States is to be vested in a Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The powers of these courts are very extensive. Their jurisdiction comprehends all civil causes except such as arise between citizens of the same state, and it extends to all cases in the law and equity arising under the Constitution. One inferior court must be established, I presume, in each state at least, with the necessary executive officers appendant thereto. It is easy to see that in the common course of things these courts will eclipse the dignity and take away from the respectability of the state courts. These courts will be in themselves totally independent of the states, deriving their authority from the United States and receiving from them fixed salaries, and in the course of human events it is to be expected that they will swallow up all the powers of the courts in respective states. Oh, boy. Didn't they just cram through more FISA? 90 plus, I think it's 98, like 97 something percent of every FISA warrant that's ever, well, I guess warrant, that's been requested has been approved. Where do they have the authority to make this court in the Constitution? They don't. They never did. However, it has usurped the Constitution. It has grown antithetical. Once again, as the great Brutus had predicted, along with many other great statesmen. Our courts, you've heard the term legislation from the bench. Just because a court says something, it a lot of times, for those of you guys who are new to the program, they're saying, that the courts ruled. And we're not an oligarchy. We've become an oligarchy, but we were not originally an oligarchy. The courts opined, and if those opinions per Article 6, Section 2 were notwithstanding of the United States Constitution and the small and defined powers of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 17, most of the time, those were to be voided, of no consequence whatsoever. That hasn't happened. We have lost our way because we have lost our knowledge and we have lost our history. I hope a lot of you guys that are homeschooling your kids now will never, ever, ever send them back to government schools, government indoctrination centers. For the next generation needs to be free. We, in this generation, seeing what we see, are the guys that need to do it, and girls. How far the clause in the 8th section of the first article may operate to do away with all idea of confederated states and to effect an entire consolidation of the whole into a general government, it is impossible to say. The powers given by this article are very general and comprehensive, and it may receive a constitution to justify the passing almost any law. A power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution all powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States, or any department or officer thereof, is a power very comprehensive and definite, and may, for aught I know, be exercised in such a manner as entirely to abolish the state legislatures. Suppose the legislator of a state should pass a law to raise money to support their government and pay the state debt. May the Congress repeal this law, because it may prevent the collection of a state which they may think proper and necessary to lay to provide for the general welfare of the United States? For all laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything to the Constitution or the laws of different states to the contrary, notwithstanding. By such a law, the government of the particular state might be overturned at one stroke, and thereby deprived of every means of its support. Boy, I'll tell you, a lot of stuff comes to mind here. When we've got 22,000 laws that infringe the right of the people to keep and bear arms. When laws of the federal government in terms of the war on drugs are so blatantly, unconstitutionally carried out. And some of you guys that are new to the show might be, still of the idea that the drug war is a good thing. Let me at least introduce you to the idea that in the 1920s, when abolition on alcohol was carried out, they passed an amendment. They passed an amendment through the Article 5 process, the only way to change the Constitution. Was it still unconstitutional? Of course it was. You have the right to put whatever you want in your body. They did it anyway. They still passed an amendment. And then, much later on, after hundreds, if not thousands of people had their livelihoods stripped from them by force, thrown in cages and killed, they passed another amendment to reverse the First Amendment. They never, ever, ever Not once even thought about doing that with the war on drugs. Completely unconstitutional. It is not meant by stating this case to insinuate that the Constitution would warrant a law of this kind, or unnecessarily to alarm the fears of the people by suggesting that the federal legislature would be more likely to pass the limits assigned them by the Constitution than that of any individual state, further than they are less responsible to the people. But what is meant is that the legislature of the United States are vested with great and uncontrollable powers of laying and collecting taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, of regulating trade, raising and supporting armies, organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, instituting courts, and other general powers, and are by this clause vested with the power of making all laws proper and necessary for carrying out all these into execution. And they may so exercise this power as entirely to annihilate the state governments and reduce this country to one single government. Oh, here we are. Governors and executives that you elected to run the finances, well, to run and execute the laws of your state without interruption from the federal government, who is supposed to be in charge of war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, not to be in the lives and the businesses of people in the states. And if they may do it, it is pretty certain they will. For it will be found that the power retained by individual states, small as it is, will be a clog upon the wheels of the government of the United States. The latter, therefore, will be naturally inclined to remove it out of the way. Besides, it is a truth confirmed by the unerring experience of ages that every man and every body of men invested with power are ever disposed to increase it and to acquire a superiority over everything that stands in their way. This disposition, which is implanted in the human nature, will operate in the federal legislature to lessen and ultimately subvert the state authority, and having such advantages will most certainly succeed if the federal government succeeds at all. It must be very evident, then, that this Constitution wants of being a complete consolidation of the several parts of the Union into a complete government possessed of perfect legislative, judicial, and executive powers to all intents and purposes, it will necessarily acquire in its exercise and operation. Brutus. Man! Here we are, America. What are you going to do? What are we going to do? I hope you share the heck out of this. I hope you get people interested in the idea of liberty, and I hope you turn them on to the prophets who gave us everything we ever needed to know about consolidation of power. Centralization of power among a few always enslaves others. I'm going to repeat that. The consolidation of power to a few will always enslave the masses of people. Liberty is a full-time sport, people. Now that we're not paying attention to baseball, basketball, football, whatever other thing that you pay a lot more attention to than your liberty or have in the past, you want to talk about a real sport. If you want to get paid to run for a seat, to fight for liberty, you don't understand liberty. Lives, fortune, and sacred honor. That's what it cost. I actually have a quote right here from the great Thomas Paine. When I say lives, fortune, and sacred honor are the cost, it's because these men wrote that in the last paragraph of, I believe is it the Declaration of Declaration of Independence. You will pay one way or another for liberty. What do you have to give to liberty is my question. What can you do? Find something. Your life. If you don't have a lot of money to throw at it, dedicate your time. Learn it, study it, know it, spread it, teach it. If you have money, give it to those who can articulate it, who can move people. Your sacred honor. I don't know what your past is. None of us are perfect. I'm definitely not perfect, for God's sakes. I was a cog in the wheel, people. But I'll tell you right now, redemption comes easy. I am real sorry for my involvement at one time in this government as a Marine. And that pains people to say that the first few times until you understand what it is. Our enemies are not peaceful people overseas. The affairs of other nations are none of our damn business. The oath of office of any position within the government is that of upholding the Constitution. That is your job. That is your one and only duty. And when I think about it, I more or less boil it down to people's rights. Because if your rights are intact, I care not what these people say they can and cannot do. If your rights are respected by other men with guns parading around with badges and uniforms, we don't have a big problem. Thomas Paine said, "What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be so highly rated." You're going to have to work your butts off. We are going to have to give this thing everything we got in this moment. Thomas Paine he also said, "If there be trouble, let it come in my day." We owe future generations a different world. One where we do not authorize the manipulation, the coercive, the acts of violence against peaceful people. It's real simple. You don't hurt people. You don't take their stuff. You don't use government against peaceful people. Good ideas don't require force. I've said it a million times. These are easy to understand. My children understand them, for God's sakes. I hope you'll share this, guys. I appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you to all the people that have been with us from the very beginning. And welcome to the rebellion. For those of you who are new here, we need everybody to unite to fight this monster that was created before us and has come to a crescendo now. The beautiful thing is we have hundreds of millions of friends and family. And all of you will be my brothers and sisters who fight for liberty. Ladies and gents, I'm Shane Hazel. I hope you enjoyed these readings with Banks and I I don't know. I hope we get back to a more regular thing here in the very near future, but I'll tell you, we're in for a fight. Get out there, share this. We are on YouTube. We are on every social platform out there. We are doing so much in terms of content. I hope you will spread this. I'm running for U.S. Senate, by the way, too. So if you guys are looking for somebody that's a little tougher than Rand Paul and the rest of them up there, who has some real experience in really, really god-awful situations of staying calm and peaceful, I hope to earn your support. I don't want your money. I don't want any of that. I think ideas will transcend everything that the establishment on both the Republican and the Democrat side have done. I think people are sick of it. And I'm here to give you a choice. I am here to fight for rights of the individual. Plain and simple. I'm here to inspire, to educate, to teach, and leave a better world for my kids, your grandkids, and generations to come. We got a real moment here to do something pretty special, where our legacy could be talked about for generations and generations, where we eclipse everybody who got it wrong before us. We have a chance to do it peacefully. We have the firepower. We have the numbers. We have the truth on our side. Go out there, like and subscribe to everything. Ladies and gents, share the heck out of this one. You can bring anything to our attention where there are abuses of people at info@rebellionpod.com or Shane@ShaneHazel.com. Outside of that, ladies and gents, if you can help us out with some reviews on whatever platform you're listening to, really help us out. Pushes us up to the top in the algorithms. And outside of that, I hope you stay safe. I hope you stay well. Treat each other really, really with some understanding in this time. Be patient with each other in terms of the flying off, the being mad. I know times are weird and crazy, and together, through love and light, we can change this world. I always say it, I mean it more than ever, ladies and gents. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. We love you. We need you. Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.